Hello, and welcome to the Pricing for the Planet podcast, the podcast that explores the intersection of business and sustainability. Today, I'm super excited because at Pricing for the Planet, in our manifesto, we talked about like working with policymakers, with government, with public entities to actually impact and influence the sustainability path that we want to build for our future. So Chris today is actually an expert in that field. So we will get some golden nuggets from him. Chris, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Really, really excited to be here and chat with you.
So before introducing yourself, Chris, you know the drill. In this podcast, we start from the end. So what would be the key takeaway you would like this audience to remember from this podcast episode?
Well, I'd say that policy is not something you can ignore and take for granted. And not everyone who's listening is in a position to be lobbying necessarily, but every company, every industry in the climate space needs to be advocating for what they do relentlessly. They can never let up. It's really a campaign, and you have to be selling the benefits that you provide. And we're learning a hard lesson in the United States right now because there's some real efforts that are on track to succeed to take away a lot of the incentives and financial incentives in particular that would help a lot of clean energy and climate businesses succeed and thrive. And there's a real risk of a lot of companies shedding jobs and staff and potentially even going out of business. And that is a real shame. And it's a direct result of policy. So it's not something that folks on this listening to this podcast and at these companies can ignore.
Perfect. So again, I'm super excited. We will learn a lot of things. So Chris, maybe can you introduce yourself and explain, what you've done in the past and what you are doing now?
Sure. I'm in Washington, D.C. I'm the founder and president of Echo Communications Advisors, and we are a policy first communications consulting firm. And we work with climate tech startup companies, we work with clean energy companies, and we work with advocacy organizations that are seeking better federal and state policy for climate, for energy. And we really take a campaign approach to convincing and persuading the key decision makers to support or oppose certain policies that help our clients.
Perfect. And again, congrats on your past. That's an impressive resume. And so, Chris, it's again glad to have you. In this community, usually we have a very like business-centric approach. We talk about like green premium, but I think we are missing one opportunity is to influence public organization and like political entities. Can you maybe explain? I think for a lot of like typical business people like me, like it's kind of fuzzy. Like where do we start? How do we influence it? Like how is it working?
Yeah, so I think that when we work with clients, and this isn't just about the people we work with, but generally, is that you have to be able to tell your story of your company as effectively as possible. And you need to understand what is going to resonate with different legislators, and it's across the political spectrum. You can't just rely on one party to support you. And you need to take moments, take opportunities to communicate over and over and over again. Repetition is your friend. And so finding those key milestones, whether it's a groundbreaking, whether it's you've crossed the threshold for how many employees you have, whether it's certainly the funding. A lot of companies are very good at announcing new funding rounds, but you don't want to skip over that, and you need to be prepared, and you shouldn't be afraid of doing interviews with reporters, for example. But you do have to be prepared, and so we work with leaders of companies and executives to fine tune their skills, to maybe start from scratch in some cases. But it's really important to communicate. Otherwise, people who don't support what you're doing or don't understand it are going to fill that void for you.
Super interesting. So just to make sure I understand, so you are helping typical, business leaders and you coach them to actually being able to communicate and especially with like public entities, right? and governments, and or it's more general?
Yeah, we want legislators. Yeah, elected officials need to know who you are. If they don't know who you are, then they're not going to fight for policies that help you succeed. And so, I think we're seeing a lot in the United States right now of the wind industry, the offshore wind in particular, is facing a lot of opposition and criticism from the president. And to me, I feel like there's been a missed opportunity where a lot of these companies are not responding with the facts, and they're letting this misinformation that is based not on reality take hold. And as a result, public opinion is dropping. People, a lot of Americans don't support offshore wind expansion anymore in the same way. Even from 3 years ago, it's down quite a bit, and that matters because elected officials follow what public opinion is. And so, if you lose support of the public, then oftentimes you'll lose it from elected officials and these decision makers who you need to be in your corner.
That's very interesting because honestly, I think nobody or very little, you know, like very few people are talking about it. We keep hearing like, okay, you need to communicate about your market and you are trying to reach out your market, but what you are saying, it's much more profound. It's like you need to influence your markets, and I think influence is the right term. And then, like, I think people usually they stop there. If they are doing that, that's already good. And then you go one step further. You're like, now that you influence your markets, you go one step further. You actually influence the legislation maker, and then that's a big win because if you can actually tap your business, your company into regulation or new laws, that's for me that's the graal because now you have kind of like a law that is working for you or with you in a
I think
sense.
I think that's exactly right. And too often we see companies don't engage until it's too late. And I would say it's never too early to start building those relationships with legislators, with staffers, with the media. And it's you have to try. A lot of businesses don't want to get involved in politics, and I understand that. They just want to focus on doing what they know and do best, and that's trying to really solve the problem in front of them. And I commend them for the great work that they're doing. It's really important and it's impressive. Um, but you can't leave alone the policy and the political piece because that could have detrimental effects, or it could have catalytic effects that can help you really make great progress even further. So either way you're looking at it, whether you're playing offense or defense, you have to be engaged, and you can't wait until it's too late because too often you can't really recover from that.
It's eye-opening what you are saying, Chris. And again, it's funny because in business we keep talking about like stakeholder mapping. So you have your clients, and then that's the
Yeah.
people you want to talk to and influence to win the deal. I've never seen in my entire 12 plus years career a slide where you see legislator, like public, like governors or staffer, and I think that's a huge mistake. Yeah, especially when you are in like sustainability, because a law can make a business like scale super fast or can kill a business instantly. Hmm.
That's right, and it's the folks you mentioned, but sometimes it's also just the very local elected officials, whether it's city council or county council. Because let's take clean energy. Like a lot of clean energy projects need local approval in order to move forward, and those are important relationships. And too often we'll hear people coming out in opposition to these projects because they've heard it might cause certain problems for them that may not be based on facts at all. And there's no one showing up saying, I want this project to happen. In too many cases, it's just not happening. And so we lose by forfeit. There's some great groups trying to change that, but the companies themselves should be, at least have a line of communication open with everyone in communities where they're trying to build projects or where they're located or whatever the case may be. But I agree with you; it should be part of that mapping of relationships and not something that's secondary or for later on.
And it's so funny, and I will ask you the question after. But it's funny. I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was with a client and like a travel company in France, and they were saying like, "Oh my God, there is a regulation that is obliging us actually to reduce like our insulation level by a lot." And right now, my biggest problem is I don't find companies capable of doing that for me at scale. So they were like, I don't remember, like they have like 150 hotels and they're like, we can find maybe one or two companies to address, one or two hotels, but like there is nobody that can, take our entire business and like change all the windows in 6 months, which is, it's very funny because like for me, I was like, oh, shit, I should start this company. It's like a huge business opportunity, but and I think they messed up because I think they got like they've been caught off guard by not following regulation closely enough and developing like this, like, I don't know, a network, an ecosystem of partners. So do you have examples
Right.
of like
Yeah.
some of your client that was able to actually like influence like local or like state or like federal institution, and then at some point they were able to have a law that was really benefiting their business?
Well, I'd say take the process that's happening right now in the United States is we work with a geothermal company, and they're doing really great work, advanced geothermal, and the geothermal industry as a whole really wasn't engaged in the way it needed to be. A few years ago, when the biggest climate bill in the United States history was passed into law, that was called the Inflation Reduction Act, and that was in 2022. And geothermal really didn't get that much from it. And so they realized, okay, we need to be more engaged here. And so, um, there are some provisions that they did get. And right now, with the current political leadership, there's an effort to take away all of that: wind, solar, hydrogen, even the few geothermal pieces that are really important. And I think we've been able to work with our client, and they've been really great with this. Is trying to communicate the benefits of geothermal and how it's clean. It provides jobs for folks transitioning from oil and gas. It has a lot of the same engineering skills and know-how. It doesn't use a lot of water. It's very low carbon intensive operations. And there's just so much potential for geothermal to be anywhere, because if you drill deep enough down, you're going to find heat, and that's going to be a benefit. So we've been working with this client to help them, kind of make sure everyone knows the benefits of what they're working on. And it's still not clear where the legislation is going to go, but there is some positive movement to preserve those tax credits for geothermal, which would be really, really important. And we're hoping, we should know more actually the next few days, next couple of weeks, what happens. But things are looking good, and that's because the industry and our client has been able to tell their story and gain support from legislators across the political spectrum.
Love that. Great example. And Chris, so how is it working? Because I'm sure after those like 30 minutes, I think everybody's like, crap, like I should start working with, legislator or with Chris. So I think the first reaction, like for me as a business owner, I'm like how much time it will take. Like I'm already like, very busy. I'm like, I love the idea, but like, so can you squeeze enough time to have an impact? Is it, working with an organization like yours that kind of like outsource this type of work? Like, how is it working?
Yeah, I'd say just getting started. You don't have to go from 0 to 60 overnight, but taking that first step is often a really great start. And whether it's working with us at Echo Communications or with somebody else, I would encourage you to just get started, have the first conversation. You can scale appropriately based on time. You also can have other people. A lot of business leaders are successful when they have other people doing the things that they aren't experts in. That's how you can succeed and really have success. So there's a little bit of engagement, but I think the payoff is certainly worthwhile. And I think folks like us tend to be very cognizant of the fact that executive startup leaders don't have a lot of time as it is, and so you need to find someone who's going to respect your time and understand that if we're talking to you, then it's going to be valuable.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes total sense. So how is it working, Chris? Like if anyone is interested in this podcast, where should they go? Like how do they start the process?
Well, they can find us on LinkedIn. They can go to EchoComms, COMMS.com, EchoComms.com, and we can certainly set up a conversation. But I would just say that, if there's also like a trade group or some sort of collective entity that you can maybe pool some of this work, that is really effective and worthwhile in speaking up and being part of that. That tends to strengthen the industry as a whole, whether it's talk about climate tech companies more broadly, whether it's specific types of energy. There's definitely groups that are existing already, and heck, if there isn't one, then someone should start one, and make sure that there is voices are being heard with the decision makers, because they can often hold your fate in their hands.
Awesome. Do you have some best practices to share? And again, I'm far from being an expert, but like if I have, I don't know, couple of hours, where should we start? Should we start like, as you said, more like local? Should we try to talk with the mayor? Should we try to get to, I don't know, to Washington directly, to the governor or to the Senate? I mean, like what would be a recommendation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think I would start locally. If there's if you haven't met your mayor yet, you should reach out to your mayor. Mayors love to talk about emerging companies that are in their city, and they will champion you if they just get to know you a little bit. And so that's a great place to start. I would definitely reach out to the governor. You should invite the governor to come tour your facility if you have one. If it's at a point, if you have a milestone coming up, you should make sure to invite all the elected officials in your community, in your state, and also your senators. If you're in the United States, invite your senators, your members of Congress, state legislators. It's really good. Even if they can't attend, they can get to know you better and what you're doing. And then it doesn't hurt. You don't have to make frequent trips to Washington, but come to Washington. We can show you around and um, help you navigate the halls of DC, or the halls of Capitol Hill in Congress, and meet with some people, introductory meetings. If there's specific legislation that is active or could be, or if there's a bill that you think someone should introduce because it would help you, you can go and have that conversation. And there's no harm in doing that. The only thing it takes is some of your time, and so you just want to make sure that you're using your time effectively.
And I was taking notes, Chris, because you gave me a lot of ideas.
Excellent, excellent.
No, yeah, super interesting. I think that's definitely, again, like I reiterate, but I think right now there is a major opportunity for everybody in the business world, which is really like you need to have this, you don't need to be Google. I remember when I was at Google, I think we had a dedicated team, that was based in like Washington and in Brussels, and they would influence kind of like the public entities. But I think even as a small, I think I love your idea. Even as a small company, you can benefit so much by being connected with, the mayor, the governor, the local officials. And I think that could really benefit your business. And yeah, I mean, that's brilliant. I'm almost wondering, why nobody's not, you know, like we should hear more about that.
Yeah, and I'd say talking about how you talk about what you're doing, you really need to be savvy to the political environment, because you might have noticed it changed in Washington recently, and uh, and so how you talk about what you're doing if you're going to win support is really important. And one of the things that we try to emphasize is that, um, you know, uh, the messaging matters, and we're not talking about things in the same way we talked about a year ago. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're changing what you're doing or changing your values, but you need to be, you can't ignore the political climate that exists today in Washington. And so we're less talking about how this is going to solve or address an issue with climate change, but we're talking about how this is going to save money, lower prices, help help with energy abundance, and there's been a lot of people talking about American energy dominance, which some people like, some people don't. But um, there's a way in which we have to shift the language in order to make sure that we're winning support for policies that are being considered or being considered for repeal. So the messaging and how you talk about what you're doing is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's at my small scale, but I'm working with a lot of manufacturing company, and man, if today you can go see, the Fortune 500 manufacturing company could be in automotive or heavy equipment, and you are telling them like, I have like manufacturing capabilities right now in the US, man, you have a big business. So,
Yes,
and I think now I'm extrapolating. So now if you are connected to, I don't know, like, the governor of Michigan or the governor of Alabama, and you're like, look, I have this big warehouse. We are ready to, do some aluminum-based parts for, automotive or heavy equipment. Do you know any companies? I'm sure, this governor could like say, yes, like five businesses, you know, talk about that because that's a big concern right now. So even like reverse engineering, like, public and then being smart about like regulations and laws, man, that's a big business edge.
absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
And Chris, I'm sorry, but I have to ask this question as European because we have the feeling in Europe that actually we spend our time doing regulation compared to the US, where you are much more, let's say,
Mhm.
flexible about regulation or less regulated. Do you have a point of view? And again, huge bias because I'm based in Europe. But so what's your view between the European system and the US system?
You cut out a little bit there, so I think you're asking what's the. Would you mind just repeating the question?
Yeah, yeah. I was asking, do you have a point of view between, the European system and the US system? Because again, we have the feeling that we do too many regulations in Europe, but I would love to have your point of view because, again, maybe it's just a
Um,
bias.
yeah, I think it can vary from country to country in Europe because and not just about regulations, but incentives and timelines for permitting, for example. Um, I know like Germany, there's some real more favorable permitting for certain industries in the energy sector. But the United States has a challenge that they're facing that we're facing right now in that the back and forth, the political swinging of policies every 4 years really creates uncertainty for businesses, and it makes it very difficult to plan for the business cycle because you're having to contend with the political cycle, and it's hard. How do you look? You can't just plan for 4 years. You need to be able to plan for much longer than that, for 10 years, for 15. And the dramatic changes every few years that we're seeing lately makes it very difficult for anyone trying to invest. And so, um, you know, honestly, I think businesses just want certainty, whether it's good or bad. Just knowing what the rules of the road are is very helpful because you can plan accordingly, or you go somewhere else. But we are seeing that if some of the legislation that the United States Congress is considering right now, if that passes, there's going to be a lot of companies that are going to be going to Europe to to invest there instead because there's it's so restrictive for what they're trying to do here. And that that for us that would be unfortunate, but that would be good for Europe, I suppose. And so there's pros and cons to the different approaches that we see from Europe and the United States, but um, uh, I think that certainty is the number one thing that businesses are looking for.
And is it part of your service actually to help businesses to kind of like at least understand what's going on in the US, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, and in other part of the world, and like how to take advantage of those, moving regulations?
Yeah, certainly we are most knowledgeable about the United States. We have a little bit of knowledge on Europe and elsewhere, but we definitely help. Here's what's happening. Here's what could happen if this legislation moves forward. A lot of the businesses are pretty attuned to some of these things already, but the looking forward of from a policy point of view and what the impacts might be, that's definitely something that we help with our clients.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much. It was really interesting. Do you have anything else that you would like the audience to know or to share with the audience?
I would just say that the I've been alluding to and talking about the some challenging policy that could be coming, but I think that the thing that I'm impressed by all the entrepreneurs working in the climate tech space is that they just see these challenges and they go right through them and they try to solve them and they don't let bad policy for a few years deter them. And so it's just really inspiring and it's great to see all these folks working in the climate tech space, trying to solve these really important challenges that we have. They shouldn't be made harder by the government, but that's kind of where we're at right now. But I just have a lot of faith that these entrepreneurs are going to continue to do what they do best and build their business, build their products, and pursue their ideas. And so I just am grateful for all the work that's being done, both in the United States and Europe and across the world, frankly.
Perfect. Chris, thank you so much. For the audience, thank you for listening. I hope you learned something. I personally learned a lot, so thank you so much, Chris. And I think that my big takeaway is really like that was something I was not thinking enough about having, like working with, politicians, public entities, and honestly, that will be on top of my to-do for the next coming months.
I really appreciated the chance to chat and thank you for having me on.